r/confession I exposed my veteran grandmother's friends who scammed her. The bank statement in my hands was shaking, but I couldn't tell if it was from my trembling fingers or the rage building in my chest. $15,000. Gone. All of it traced back to checks written in my grandmother's careful handwriting to women I'd watched her bake cookies for, women she'd invited to every family gathering, women she called her dearest friends. Nana, what is this? I held up the statement, pointing to the latest entry. Another $800 check to Patricia Hendricks, dated just 3 days ago. My grandmother looked up from her crossword puzzle, and I watched her face crumple in that way that made my heart break. At 78, Dorothy Chen still carried herself with the posture of the military nurse she'd been in Vietnam, but lately, something had changed. She seemed smaller, more fragile, like she was carrying a weight she couldn't share. Oh honey, that's just. Patricia needed help with her medical bills. You know how expensive everything is these days. Her voice was barely above a whisper, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. I sat down across from her at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd helped me with homework for years after my parents died. The afternoon light streaming through her apartment window illuminated the stack of past due notices she tried to hide under a placemat. Nana, this is the 4th medical emergency Patricia's had in 2 months. And look here, I flipped through the statements, my voice getting sharper despite my efforts to stay calm. Susan needed $1,200 for her granddaughter's surgery. Linda borrowed $900 for car repairs. Margaret needed $600 for her electric bill. These are all from the senior center group, aren't they? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. My grandmother's hands, weathered from decades of caring for others, twisted in her lap. These were hands that had held dying soldiers, that had worked double shifts to put my father through college, that had raised me when I had nowhere else to go. They're my friends, she said finally, but even she didn't sound convinced anymore. Friends don't do this, Nana. I reached across and gently took her hand. When was the last time any of them invited you to lunch? When was the last time they called just to check on you? I watched her face as the reality settled in. It was like watching someone realize they'd been walking around with a knife in their back for months. The hurt in her eyes made me want to find these women and, well, nothing legal. I was so stupid, she whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. I thought they cared about me. After your grandfather died, they were all I had besides you, Anne. Stop. I squeezed her hand. You're not stupid. You're not anything but kind and generous, and they took advantage of that. This isn't your fault. But as I sat there watching my grandmother, a woman who'd served 2 tours in a war zone, who'd rebuilt her life from nothing, who'd single-handedly raised me, dissolve into shame and embarrassment, I made a decision. These women had picked the wrong family to mess with. My grandmother might be too proud and too kind to fight back, but I wasn't. They thought they could prey on an elderly veteran living on Social Security. They thought they could mock her behind her back while bleeding her dry. They had no idea what was coming for them. The next morning, I drove Nana to the senior center for her weekly bridge game, my stomach churning with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. I'd spent half the night researching elder fraud laws and the other half plotting how to get evidence against these vultures masquerading as friends. You don't have to walk me in, sweetheart, Nana said as I parked, but her voice carried that new fragility that made my chest tight. I know you have classes. I want to meet your friends properly, I lied smoothly. Maybe grab some contact information in case of emergencies. The Sunset Gardens Senior Center buzzed with the quiet activity of afternoon programs. I spotted them immediately at their usual table in the corner, for women in their 70s, perfectly coiffed and dripping with jewelry that seemed awfully expensive for people constantly having financial emergencies. Patricia Hendricks was holding court, her laugh carrying across the room as she gestured with manicured nails. The same woman who'd supposedly needed $800 for medical bills 3 days ago was wearing what looked like a brand new silk blouse. Dorothy. There you are, dear. Susan Martinez's voice was honey-sweet as we approached, but I caught the way her eyes quickly assessed me, calculating in cold. And this must be your granddaughter. My, isn't she lovely? This is Emma, Nana said, and I heard the pride in her voice despite everything. She's studying business at the university. How wonderful, Linda Patterson chimed in, not bothering to look up from her cards. Dorothy talks about you constantly. Always bragging about how smart you are. The casual dismissal in her tone made my jaw clench, but I forced a smile. She's always talking about you ladies too. Says you're like family. Margaret Stevens finally glanced up, and something flickered in her expression. Was that guilt? Or just annoyance at the interruption? Well, we certainly try to look out for each other, Patricia said, reaching over to pat Nana's hand with theatrical affection. Especially when times get tough. You know how it is with fixed incomes. The audacity was breathtaking. I watched this woman, who'd taken nearly $3,000 from my grandmother over the past 4 months, deliver that line with Oscar-worthy sincerity. Speaking of which, Susan said, lowering her voice conspiratorially, Patricia, how did your appointment go yesterday? The one with the specialist. My blood turned to ice. They were setting up another con right in front of me. Patricia sighed heavily, pressing a hand to her chest. Oh, it's going to be expensive. The treatment they're recommending. She trailed off, glancing meaningfully at my grandmother. But we don't need to burden anyone else with our troubles. Nonsense, Nana said immediately, just as they'd known she would. If you need help. Actually, I interrupted, pulling out my phone, my roommate's mom just went through something similar. What kind of specialist was it? Maybe she could recommend someone more affordable. The silence that followed was electric. Patricia's eyes darted to the other women, and I saw Susan's mouth tighten almost imperceptibly. Oh, it's very complicated, Patricia said finally. Very specialized. I don't think your roommate's situation would be applicable. Try me, I pressed, my smile never wavering. I'm studying business, remember? I'm great with research. Margaret suddenly stood up, gathering her purse. I just remembered, I have an appointment. Ladies, we'll have to reschedule. One by one, they made their excuses and scattered like cockroaches when the lights come on. Within minutes, Nana and I were sitting alone at the table, the abandoned card game spread between us. That was strange, Nana murmured, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. Yes, I agreed, watching Patricia's retreating figure through the window. Very strange indeed. Now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. And they had no idea the war they'd just started. That evening, I sat in my dorm room with my laptop open, diving deeper into my investigation. What I found made my blood boil even hotter. Patricia Hendricks wasn't just targeting my grandmother. A quick Facebook search revealed photos of her at expensive restaurants, tagged locations at high-end spas, and check-ins at the local casino. All time-stamped within days of my grandmother's emergency payments. But it got worse. Much worse. I'd created a fake social media account and managed to friend Linda Patterson's daughter, who lived across the country. Her timeline was filled with complaints about her mother's sudden generosity, designer handbags, expensive wines, a recent kitchen renovation that Linda claimed she'd saved up for years to afford. The dates aligned perfectly with Nana's bank statements. My phone buzzed with a text from Nana. Emma, dear, Patricia called. She needs another loan for her treatment. $1,200 this time. I told her I'd think about it. I stared at the message, my hands shaking with rage. They weren't even waiting. After that awkward encounter at the senior center, instead of backing off, they were doubling down. The sheer arrogance was staggering. I called her immediately. Nana, please don't give her anything else. Not until we figure this out. But sweetheart, if she really needs help. She doesn't. I pulled up Patricia's latest Instagram post, a photo of her at an upscale wine bar, dated just 2 hours ago. Trust me on this. Please. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. I was grabbing coffee before my economics class when my phone rang. The caller ID showed the senior center's number. Is this Emma Chin? Dorothy's granddaughter? The voice belonged to Janet Morrison, the center's director. Yes, ma'am. I'm calling because there's been a situation. Some of the other members have expressed concerns about your grandmother's behavior yesterday. They're saying she was acting paranoid, making accusations. My grip tightened on the phone. Accusations about what? About financial impropriety among the bridge group. Now, I want to be clear, Dorothy is a valued member of our community, but some of the ladies are feeling uncomfortable. They're worried about her mental state. The manipulation was breathtaking. They were trying to paint my grandmother as the problem, questioning her credibility before she could expose them. Classic abuser tactics: isolate the victim, make them seem unstable. Mrs. Morrison, has my grandmother actually made any formal complaints? Well, no, but the impression was. Then with all due respect, it sounds like gossip. I kept my voice level, professional. My grandmother is as sharp as ever. If there are concerns about anyone's behavior, maybe those should be investigated properly. There was a pause. Of course. I just wanted to touch base. We care about all our members. After hanging up, I realized the stakes had just gotten higher. These women weren't just thieves, they were strategic. They were already working to discredit Nana, probably sensing that yesterday's questioning had put them at risk. I needed evidence, and I needed it fast. That afternoon, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called in sick to my part-time job and drove to the senior center during their afternoon activities. I parked across the street with a clear view of the parking lot and waited. At 3:47 p.m., I watched Patricia, Susan, Linda, and Margaret huddle together outside the building after their usual programs ended. Even from a distance, their body language screamed conspiracy. Patricia was gesticulating wildly, while the others kept glancing around nervously. They knew they were in trouble. And cornered animals, I was quickly learning, were the most dangerous kind. I pulled out my phone and started recording, hoping to catch at least some of their conversation. The video quality was grainy from the distance, but their agitated gestures spoke volumes. After about 10 minutes, they scattered to their respective cars, and I made a split-second decision that would change everything. I followed Patricia. She drove through the affluent part of town, past the nice shopping centers and gated communities, finally pulling into the driveway of a house that had to be worth at least $500,000. No wonder she needed my grandmother's loans. Maintaining this lifestyle on a fixed income would be impossible without supplemental income from somewhere. I parked down the street and was about to leave when Patricia's front door opened. Another woman emerged, younger, maybe in her 50s, well-dressed. Patricia hugged her goodbye, then handed her what looked like an envelope. The woman got into a BMW and drove off. My investigative instincts kicked in. I managed to get the BMW's license plate number before it disappeared around the corner. Another piece of the puzzle, though I wasn't sure yet how it fit. The next morning brought a crisis that blindsided me completely. Emma, thank God you answered. Nana's voice was shaky, panicked in a way I'd never heard before. Someone broke into my house last night. My blood went cold. What? Are you hurt? Did you call the police? I'm fine, sweetheart, but it's so strange. Nothing valuable was taken. The TV, my jewelry, even the cash I keep in the kitchen drawer, all still here. But someone went through my papers. My desk drawers, the filing cabinet. Everything's been rifled through. I was already grabbing my keys. I'm coming over. Don't touch anything else. The drive to Nana's house felt endless. When I arrived, 2 police officers were just finishing up their report. Officer Martinez, ironically sharing a surname with one of the vultures, looked skeptical. No signs of forced entry, he explained to me. Whoever did this either had a key or knew how to pick locks professionally. Very unusual for a burglary where nothing of obvious value was taken. After the police left, Nana and I surveyed the damage together. Her normally pristine home office looked like a tornado had hit it. Bank statements, medical records, insurance papers, all scattered across the floor. Nana, what papers do you think they were looking for? She wrung her hands nervously. I'm not sure. But Emma, I think I made a terrible mistake yesterday. What do you mean? After you left, Patricia called again. She was crying, saying she was desperate for that loan. And I told her I needed to talk to my financial advisor first. That I was keeping better track of my expenses now because you were helping me organize my finances. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. You told them I was looking at your financial records. I thought it would buy me time, make her understand I couldn't just write checks anymore. But Emma, what if they were looking for evidence that we might have discovered something? I sat down heavily on her couch, the implications washing over me. The break-in wasn't random. They were trying to figure out how much we knew, maybe looking for documentation that could implicate them. The fact that they'd escalated to criminal activity meant we were closer to the truth than I'd realized. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Maybe you should focus on your studies instead of playing detective. College girls who stick their noses where they don't belong sometimes find more trouble than they bargained for. I showed Nana the message and watched the color drain from her face. Emma, maybe we should just let this go. I can't have you getting hurt because of my problems. But looking around her violated home, seeing the fear in my strong grandmother's eyes, I felt something harden inside me. They just made this personal. I spent the next 3 days in a state of controlled fury, alternating between classes and surveillance. The threat had backfired. Instead of scaring me off, it had crystallized my resolve. But I also couldn't shake the image of Nana's frightened face, or the violation of her safe space. These women had crossed a line from financial abuse into outright intimidation. My breakthrough came from an unexpected source: campus resources. During a study session at the library, I remembered that our criminology department had connections with local law enforcement. Professor Williams had mentioned it during lectures about white-collar crime, how elder financial abuse was often underreported and difficult to prosecute without proper documentation. I made an appointment under the guise of academic research, but ended up spilling everything to Professor Williams. She listened intently, taking notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions that made me realize how much evidence I'd actually gathered. Emma, this is textbook elder financial abuse, she said finally. The targeting, the fake emergencies, the social pressure, even the intimidation tactics when they felt threatened. You've documented a clear pattern. But is it enough for charges? Possibly. But you need to be strategic about this. Have you considered that your grandmother might not be their only victim? The thought had occurred to me, but I'd been so focused on Nana's situation that I hadn't explored it fully. Professor Williams suggested I reach out to the senior center's other members, carefully, and with proper adult supervision. That evening, I called Mrs. Henderson, Nana's former bridge partner who'd been pushed out of the group 6 months ago. I'd remembered Nana mentioning how hurt Mrs. Henderson had been about being excluded. Oh, honey, Mrs. Henderson said when I explained why I was calling. I wondered when someone would figure it out. Those women are poison. Did they ask you for money too? Multiple times. But I grew up during the Depression. I don't lend money, period. That's when I suddenly became difficult to get along with and stopped getting invited to their little gatherings. Mrs. Henderson had more information than I dared hope for. She'd witnessed several of their conversations about generous friends and had noticed how other women would join their circle, become their best friends, then disappear within months, usually looking dejected and embarrassed. There was Eleanor Martinez, different Martinez from Patricia, no relation. Sweet woman, widowed recently. They swarmed her right after her husband's funeral. She stopped coming to the center entirely after about 4 months with them. Same with Janet Kim and Beverly Torres. I felt sick. This wasn't opportunistic theft, it was a systematic operation. Mrs. Henderson, would you be willing to help me contact these other women? Already thought of that, dear. I've been keeping Eleanor's phone number, hoping she'd come back to our knitting group. Eleanor Martinez's voice shook when I called her. At first, she was reluctant to talk, ashamed of being taken in by false friends. But when I explained about Nana, her tone shifted to anger. 15,000. Oh, that poor woman. They got about 8,000 from me before I finally realized what was happening. The fake medical emergencies, the sob stories about grandchildren in trouble, all lies. Would you be willing to document what happened? Maybe talk to the police. There was a long pause. I've been too embarrassed. But if Dorothy is going through the same thing, yes. Those women are predators. By Friday, I had contact information for 3 additional victims and a timeline showing the group's activities going back at least 2 years. The pattern was always the same: identify a recently widowed or isolated woman, befriend her intensively, then begin the financial requests. But as I was organizing my evidence, my phone rang with devastating news. Emma, Nana's voice was barely above a whisper. I just got a call from the bank. Someone tried to withdraw $5,000 from my savings account this morning. What do you mean someone tried? I was already grabbing my jacket, panic rising in my chest. The teller called because it was an unusual amount, and the woman claiming to be my granddaughter didn't have proper ID. She had my account number though, Emma. And she knew my mother's maiden name. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Nana, I'm coming to get you right now. We're going to the bank together, and then we're calling the police. But sweetheart, what if they... No. My voice came out harder than I intended. They just attempted bank fraud. This isn't about hurt feelings or bad loans anymore. This is serious federal crime territory. The drive to pick up Nana felt surreal. How had they gotten her banking information? The break-in suddenly made more sense. They hadn't just been looking for evidence of our investigation. They'd been hunting for financial documents, account numbers, personal information they could use for identity theft. At the bank, the manager, Mr. Peterson, pulled up the security footage from that morning. The woman attempting the withdrawal was young, maybe early 30s, with dark hair. Not one of the senior center group. She presented herself as Dorothy Chen's granddaughter Emma, Mr. Peterson explained. Had the account number and some personal details, but when we asked for ID, she claimed she'd forgotten her wallet. That's when our fraud protocols kicked in. I showed him my actual ID. This is what Emma Chen's driver's license looks like. Do you have any more footage? The parking lot camera had captured the fake Emma getting into a silver Honda with Patricia Martinez behind the wheel. My hands clenched into fists as I watched Patricia orchestrate what was essentially attempted robbery of my grandmother. Officer Martinez, the real one, arrived within minutes of our call. The irony of his name wasn't lost on any of us. He reviewed the footage with a grim expression. Mrs. Chen, this escalation is concerning. They've moved from financial coercion to attempted identity theft and fraud. I'm going to need you both to come to the station to file a formal report. As we drove to the police station, Nana was quieter than I'd ever seen her. Finally, she spoke. Emma, I keep thinking about all those secrets they must have shared with each other. About me. About how easy I was to fool. You weren't foolish, Nana. You were kind. There's a difference. I told Patricia about my late husband's insurance policy. About you being in college, how proud I was that you were studying so hard. I gave them ammunition to hurt both of us. The police station buzzed with activity, but Officer Martinez found us a quiet room to give our statement. As I laid out everything, the timeline, the other victims, the break-in, now the attempted bank fraud, I watched his expression grow more serious. Miss Chen, how many other potential victims did you identify? 3 confirmed, but Mrs. Henderson thinks there might be more who were too embarrassed to come forward. And you have documentation of the financial requests. I pulled out my folder, now thick with printed emails, text screenshots, and handwritten notes from phone conversations. Everything's here. Dates, amounts, the fake emergencies they used as pretenses. Officer Martinez reviewed the materials, occasionally whistling under his breath. This is good work. Really good work. You've essentially built our case for us. But as we were wrapping up, his radio crackled with an update that made my blood run cold. Unit 23, we've got a report of harassment at Sunset Senior Center. Elderly woman being confronted by a group of agitated females. Requesting backup. Officer Martinez looked at us grimly. Ladies, I think your investigation just forced their hand. The drive to the senior center felt like it took forever, even with Officer Martinez's lights flashing. My mind raced through possibilities. Who was being harassed? Mrs. Henderson. One of the other victims I'd contacted. My stomach churned as I realized that by reaching out to people, I might have put someone else in danger. There, Nana pointed as we pulled into the parking lot. That's Eleanor's car. Through the large windows of the community room, I could see a cluster of people. Patricia, Susan, and Linda had Eleanor Martinez backed against a wall near the bulletin board, their body language aggressive and intimidating. Several other seniors had gathered at a distance, clearly uncomfortable but unsure how to intervene. Stay in the car until I assess the situation, Officer Martinez instructed, but I was already unbuckling my seatbelt. That woman helped me. I'm not hiding while they intimidate her. Inside, Patricia's voice carried across the room, spreading lies about us to anyone who'll listen. You're embarrassing yourself, Eleanor. Everyone knows you've been confused since Richard died. Eleanor looked smaller than she had sounded on the phone, but her voice was steady. I'm not confused about the $8,000 you took from me. Or the fake story about your granddaughter's car accident that never happened. We never took anything, Susan spat. You offered to help friends in need. Now you're trying to make us look like criminals because you regret your generosity. That's when I stepped through the door, with Nana right behind me. Actually, attempting to withdraw money from someone else's bank account using a fake ID makes you criminals. The bank has footage. The color drained from Patricia's face so fast I thought she might faint. Susan grabbed Linda's arm, whispering something urgent in her ear. But Patricia recovered quickly, her expression shifting to something between panic and rage. You little bitch, she hissed, taking a step toward me. You have no idea what you've started. Patricia Gutierrez. Officer Martinez's voice cut through the tension as he entered behind us. I need to speak with you regarding an attempted bank fraud this morning. The entire community room went dead silent. I could see other seniors pulling out their phones, probably texting their families about the drama unfolding. Mrs. Henderson appeared at my elbow, positioning herself protectively near Eleanor. Officer, there's been a misunderstanding, Patricia said, suddenly switching to a sweet, grandmotherly tone. These girls are upset about some money between friends. You know how emotional family can get about their elders' finances. Ma'am, we have you on surveillance footage dropping off someone who attempted to impersonate Mrs. Chen's granddaughter at First National Bank this morning. That's not a misunderstanding, that's a felony. Linda started crying, loud, dramatic sobs. We were just trying to help. Patricia said Dorothy wanted to surprise Emma with money for college, but she was too embarrassed to ask Emma directly. Susan shot Linda a look that could have melted steel. Shut up, Linda. Help with what? Officer Martinez pulled out his notepad. Help her withdraw money without proper authorization. Using false identification. That's when Eleanor stepped forward, her earlier timidity replaced by steel I recognized from Nana's military bearing. Officer, there are more of us. More women they've stolen from. Emma found us, helped us realize we weren't alone. Patricia's mask finally slipped completely. You stupid old cows don't know when to keep your mouths shut. We treated you like family, and this is how you repay us. By calling theft what it is. Nana's voice carried the authority of someone who commanded field hospitals under fire. Patricia, you looked me in the eye and lied about your granddaughter's medical bills. While planning to steal from my bank account. The weight of evidence, witnesses, and their own admissions was closing in around them. But as Officer Martinez reached for his handcuffs, Susan suddenly grabbed her purse. This isn't over, she said, backing toward the side exit. You have no idea how deep this goes. And then she ran. The next few seconds felt like they happened in slow motion. Susan bolted through the side exit, her purse clutched against her chest like a shield. Officer Martinez barked into his radio for backup to intercept her while Patricia and Linda stood frozen, realizing their ringleader had just abandoned them. Linda, sit down. Patricia, hands where I can see them, Officer Martinez commanded, his tone brooking no argument. But as he moved toward Patricia, she suddenly lurched forward, not toward the exit, but toward the community bulletin board where Eleanor was still standing. You want to know how deep this goes? Patricia snarled, yanking papers off the bulletin board with manic energy. Look around this pathetic place. Half these people are barely hanging on. We were doing them a favor, giving their sad little lives some purpose. She scattered flyers and announcements across the floor, then pulled out her phone. Susan's not the only one who's smart enough to have backup plans. My blood chilled as she started rapidly typing something. Officer, she's contacting someone, I said urgently. Patricia, put the phone down, Officer Martinez ordered, but she was already hitting send. Too late, she sneered. My nephew Marcus knows all about our little business arrangement. He's got copies of every bank statement, every personal document we've collected. And he's got a key to Dorothy's house. Nana grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in. Emma, your laptop. All your research notes. They're on your desk in my spare room. The realization hit me like a physical blow. While we'd been at the police station and then racing here, someone could have been ransacking Nana's house again, but this time with specific targets. My investigation files. The contact information for other victims. Maybe even Nana's financial documents that I've been helping her organize. Officer, we need to send someone to my grandmother's house immediately, I said, but he was already pulling out his radio. Dispatch, I need a unit at 847, Maple Grove Drive. Possible breaking and entering in progress. Patricia's laughter was sharp and bitter. Marcus is probably long gone by now. But not before he got what we needed. Eleanor, who had been quietly listening, stepped forward with more courage than I would have had in her position. Patricia, what exactly did you think would happen? That you could keep stealing from people forever? Stealing. Patricia's voice rose to a near shriek. You lonely old women were throwing money at us. Desperate for friends, for attention, for someone to care about your pathetic stories. We gave you drama, excitement, purpose. You should be thanking us. Linda, still sobbing, suddenly looked up with swollen eyes. Patricia, stop. Just stop. We knew it was wrong. You said it was just borrowing, but we never intended to pay anyone back. Linda. Patricia whirled on her. Keep your mouth shut. But the floodgates had opened. She made us practice the stories, Linda continued, looking at Officer Martinez. We had scripts for the emergencies. She said rich people owed it to others to help, that we were just redistributing wealth. From elderly veterans on fixed incomes. Nana's voice could have cut glass. Linda, I eat generic cereal so I can afford my medications. That money you took wasn't wealth, it was my survival fund. Officer Martinez's radio crackled again. Unit 15 to base. We're at 847, Maple Grove. Front door is ajar, signs of forced entry. Requesting forensics. My heart sank. Officer, how much damage could they have done? Depends on what they were looking for and how much time they had. Patricia smirked, even with her wrists now in handcuffs. Enough time. Marcus is thorough when he needs to be. Mrs. Henderson, who had been quietly taking photos of the scene with her phone, looked up grimly. Emma, there's something else you need to know. I didn't just find 3 other victims. After you called me yesterday, I reached out to my friend Janet at the Riverside Senior Center across town. They've had similar incidents. Same pattern, same fake emergencies. Officer Martinez paused in reading Patricia her rights. How many other locations? At least 2 more senior centers that I know of. Possibly more. The scope of what we'd uncovered was expanding beyond what I'd imagined. This wasn't just a local scam, it was organized, multi-location, with backup plans and escape routes. As they led Patricia and Linda away, Patricia turned back one more time. You think this ends with us? You have no idea what you've unleashed. The ride back to Nana's house felt endless, even though it was only 10 minutes. Officer Martinez followed us in his patrol car while another unit was already processing the crime scene. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, thinking about what Marcus might have destroyed, or worse, what he might have stolen. Emma, breathe, Nana said quietly from the passenger seat. Whatever they took, we'll figure it out. But as we pulled into her driveway, my worst fears seemed confirmed. The front door hung open like a broken jaw, and I could see papers scattered across the living room floor through the window. Officer Martinez met us at the door. Ma'am, I need you both to stay back while we finish documenting everything. But I can tell you, whoever did this was looking for something specific. Detective Rodriguez emerged from the hallway, latex gloves on his hands and a grim expression on his face. Emma, your research files are gone. The laptop, all your printed notes, the contact list for other victims. They also went through Mrs. Chen's financial documents and took several folders. My stomach dropped. Detective, those files had personal information about at least 15 elderly victims across multiple senior centers. Names, addresses, phone numbers, details about their finances. Which means, Nana said quietly, they now have a roadmap to potentially intimidate or silence everyone who might testify against them. Detective Rodriguez nodded grimly. We found something else. A handwritten note on your desk. He held up an evidence bag containing a piece of paper. Through the plastic, I could read the scrawled message, stop digging or the next victims won't just lose money. The blood drained from my face. They're threatening the other victims. It gets worse, Officer Martinez added, stepping carefully around the scattered papers. We found evidence that they photographed financial documents belonging to at least 3 other women, bank statements, social security information, medical insurance cards. Identity theft potential. Nana sank into her kitchen chair, looking every one of her 78 years for the first time since this began. Emma, maybe we should. No. The word came out harder than I intended. Nana, if we back down now, they win. And they move on to the next group of victims with even more information and experience. My phone rang. Mrs. Henderson's number. Emma, thank God you answered. I just got a call from my friend Janet at Riverside. Someone broke into their senior center tonight. Destroyed their member files and stole their contact database. I put the phone on speaker so the officers could hear. Mrs. Henderson, how bad is it? Bad. But Emma, Janet said something else. Right before the break-in, they got an anonymous tip about suspicious activity at their center. Someone called and said they should check their member files for evidence of fraud. Detective Rodriguez leaned forward. Mrs. Henderson, what time was this tip called in? Around 4 p.m. About an hour before we confronted Patricia and her friends. The timeline clicked into place with sickening clarity. They had this planned, I said. Susan didn't just run away, she ran to coordinate destroying evidence at multiple locations. Which means, Detective Rodriguez said slowly, this network is bigger and better organized than we initially thought. And now they know exactly who's been investigating them. Officer Martinez's radio crackled again. All units, be advised. We have reports of suspicious activity at the Westfield Community Center and the Oak Hills Senior Living Facility. Possible coordinated break-ins in progress. Emma, Nana said quietly, what have we gotten ourselves into? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your grandmother lives alone. Accidents happen to people who don't mind their own business. I showed the screen to Detective Rodriguez, my hands trembling. Detective, they're not just stealing money anymore. No, he agreed grimly. Now it's personal. The text message felt like ice water in my veins. Detective Rodriguez immediately called for a protective detail for Nana's house while I stared at the threatening words on my phone screen, trying to process how quickly this had escalated from financial fraud to direct intimidation. Emma, give me your phone, Detective Rodriguez said. We need to trace this number and document the threat. As I handed it over, another text appeared, check your email. My blood pressure spiked. Detective, they have access to my personal information. My email, my phone number, everything was on that laptop they stole. Officer Martinez was coordinating with dispatch when his radio exploded with activity. Multiple break-ins confirmed at senior centers across 3 counties. FBI field office has been notified due to interstate wire fraud implications. FBI. Nana looked between us. Emma, this is bigger than we thought. I pulled up my email on Nana's old desktop computer, dreading what I might find. The message was sent from a generic account. You wanted to play detective. Here are the rules. Drop your investigation, convince all victims to retract their statements, and maybe your research doesn't get used against the people you were trying to help. Attached was a PDF that made my stomach lurch. It was a detailed dossier on Mrs. Henderson, her full name, address, the fact that she lived alone, her medical conditions, even her daily routine and the time her home health aide left each day. They're not just threatening us, I whispered. They've been surveilling the victims. Detective Rodriguez read over my shoulder and immediately got back on his radio. I need protective details on all the victims we've identified. Consider this an active threat situation. My phone rang, Mrs. Henderson again, but this time her voice was shaky with fear. Emma, someone's been watching my house. My neighbor Mrs. Patterson saw a man taking pictures of my front door this morning. And Janet from Riverside just called. She got a threatening phone call 20 minutes ago. Mrs. Henderson, where are you right now? I asked. Home, but Emma, I'm scared. The caller knew things about my routine, about my grandson in Seattle. How could they know those details? Detective Rodriguez took the phone. Mrs. Henderson, this is Detective Rodriguez. Do not leave your house. We're sending an officer to you immediately. He covered the phone and spoke to Officer Martinez. How many victims are we talking about protecting? At least 15 that we know of, potentially dozens more across the other senior centers. The scope of resources needed was becoming impossible. We didn't have enough patrol cars to protect everyone, and the perpetrators seemed to know it. Another email notification chimed. This one contained photos, surveillance shots of me leaving Nana's house, walking across campus, sitting in the coffee shop where I'd done my research. They'd been watching me for days, maybe weeks. Detective, I said, my voice barely steady, they know everything. My schedule, where I live, where I go to school. They probably know about this safe house setup too. Nana stood up with the kind of determination I remembered from her military stories. Then we don't run. We end this. Nana, they're threatening violence now. This isn't about money anymore. Exactly why we can't back down. She looked at Detective Rodriguez. How long until the FBI gets involved? Agent Sarah Chen is already en route from the federal building. Should be here within an hour. My phone buzzed again. Another message, 1 hour to decide. After that, the consequences escalate. The timing wasn't coincidental. Somehow, they were monitoring police communications or had inside information about law enforcement response times. Detective, I said slowly, I think we have a bigger problem. They know the FBI is coming. The realization that they knew about the FBI's arrival sent a chill through the room that had nothing to do with the broken door. Detective Rodriguez's face darkened as he processed the implications. Either they're monitoring police frequencies, or... He paused, not wanting to voice what we were all thinking. Or someone's feeding them information from the inside, I finished. The possibility that law enforcement had been compromised made everything infinitely more dangerous. Officer Martinez stepped closer, lowering his voice. Detective, if they have access to our communications, they know about the protective details we just dispatched. They'll know exactly where each victim is being moved. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized, Janet from Riverside Senior Center. Emma. Thank God. Listen carefully, I just got a call from someone claiming to be a police officer. They said I needed to evacuate my apartment immediately due to a gas leak, and that a protective escort would pick me up in 10 minutes. Her voice was tight with suspicion. But I called the gas company. There's no leak. Janet, don't go with anyone. Real police officers should have badge numbers and department identification. What did this person sound like? Young woman, very professional. But Emma, she knew about our conversation earlier. She knew I'd spoken with you about the break-in. Detective Rodriguez grabbed his radio. All units, be advised, suspects may be impersonating law enforcement to access victims. Verify all protective details through dispatch before allowing any evacuations. But it was too late. His radio crackled with reports coming in rapid succession. Unit 23, victim at 1847, Maple Street reports unauthorized evacuation attempt. Unit 31, Mrs. Chen at Westfield is missing. Neighbor says she left with someone claiming to be FBI. They're systematically intercepting our protective efforts, Officer Martinez said grimly. My laptop chimed with another email. This time, the message was brief. Mrs. Chen says hello. She's helping us understand exactly what you've shared with police. Amazing how much people remember when properly motivated. Attached was a photo that made my knees weak, Mrs. Chen sitting in what looked like the back of a van, holding today's newspaper, looking terrified but unharmed. They have her, I whispered. They actually kidnapped Mrs. Chen. Detective Rodriguez was already calling for backup and coordinating with other departments when my phone rang. Unknown number again. Answer it, he instructed, signaling for me to put it on speaker. Emma. The voice was older, shaky. Mrs. Chen. Dear, they want to talk to you. The line transferred to a younger woman's voice, smooth, educated, completely different from the crude personas Patricia and her friends had presented. Emma, you've been very busy. We're impressed by your thoroughness. Who are you? I demanded. Let's just say Patricia and her friends were middle management. This operation has been profitable across 7 states for 3 years. Your grandmother and her friends were never the only targets. Nana's face went pale. 7 states. How many people? Mrs. Chen, you raised a smart granddaughter. Would you like to tell her the numbers we discussed? Mrs. Chen's voice was barely audible. They said over 400 victims. Millions of dollars. The scope was staggering. We weren't dealing with local con artists, this was organized crime with sophisticated intelligence gathering and coordination capabilities. Here's what's going to happen, the smooth voice continued. You have 30 minutes to call Detective Rodriguez off this investigation. All victims retract their statements. All evidence gets buried. Mrs. Chen goes home safely. And if we refuse? Well, Emma, you've seen how much we know about everyone's daily routines. Accidents are remarkably easy to arrange for elderly people who live alone. The line went dead, leaving us staring at each other in the suddenly suffocating silence of Nana's violated home. The silence stretched for maybe 10 seconds before all hell broke loose. Detective Rodriguez's radio erupted with emergency calls, officer down at Riverside Senior Center, gas explosion reported. Multiple ambulances requested at Westfield Apartments, elderly residents hospitalized with suspected food poisoning. Unit 47, break-in at Maplewood Community Center, seniors' personal files scattered everywhere. They're not waiting 30 minutes, I said, my voice hollow with realization. They're already escalating. Officer Martinez was frantically trying to coordinate responses when my phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Henderson. Emma, I'm okay, but they got Mrs. Patterson. Saw her leaving with a woman in scrubs claiming to be a visiting nurse. This isn't right. Detective Rodriguez grabbed my shoulder. We need to assume they're going to keep taking people until we comply or until we stop them permanently. His phone rang, FBI Agent Chen. She's here, he told us, then answered. Agent Chen. We have a situation that just became critical. I could hear her voice through the phone, clipped and professional. Detective, I'm pulling into the driveway now, but we have a problem. My field office just intercepted communications suggesting your suspects have military-grade surveillance equipment. This isn't amateur hour. Military-grade? My mind raced back to the precision of their intelligence gathering, the way they knew exactly when the FBI was coming, their ability to coordinate across multiple counties simultaneously. Nana, I said slowly, your friend Patricia, did she ever mention military background? Anything about technology experience? Nana's face was grim. Not Patricia, but come to think of it, her daughter works for some government contractor. Defense something or other. I always thought it was strange how Patricia knew so much about everyone's personal business. Agent Chen knocked on the front door, and Officer Martinez let her in. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that immediately cataloged the broken door frame and our tense expressions. Agent Chen, Sarah Chen, she introduced herself quickly. I've been briefed on the way over, but this situation has escalated beyond local fraud. We're now looking at interstate kidnapping, which puts this firmly in federal jurisdiction. They have Mrs. Chen, wait, that's confusing. They have one of the victims, also named Mrs. Chen, but no relation to you, I explained hurriedly. And they knew you were coming before Detective Rodriguez even called you. Agent Chen's expression darkened. Show me everything. Every communication, every threat, every piece of evidence you've gathered. As I pulled up the emails and photos on Nana's computer, Agent Chen studied them with the focused intensity of someone trained to read between lines. The metadata on these photos shows they were taken with professional equipment. The precision of their victim surveillance suggests database access beyond what civilian identity thieves typically have. What does that mean? Nana asked. It means we're dealing with people who have access to systems they shouldn't. Military databases, social security records, veterans affairs information. She looked directly at Nana. Mrs. Rodriguez, you mentioned you're a veteran. 2 tours, Army Nurse Corps. They didn't target you randomly. Veterans information is valuable because it includes financial records, medical history, family contacts, everything needed for sophisticated identity theft and fraud operations. My phone rang again. The smooth voice from before, but now with an edge of impatience. Emma, I see the FBI has arrived. Agent Chen looks very professional in her navy jacket. Time's up. I mouthed, they can see us to the room, and Agent Chen immediately moved to the window, peering through the blinds while drawing her weapon. Here's your final offer, the voice continued. Bring Agent Chen and Detective Rodriguez to the Riverside Senior Center parking lot in 15 minutes. Come alone, no backup, no surveillance. You get Mrs. Chen back, and we discuss terms. That's obviously a trap, I said. Of course it is. But Emma, check your email. The new message contained a live video feed of Mrs. Chen sitting in what looked like a basement, with 4 other elderly people I recognized from the senior centers. All looking terrified but alive. 15 minutes, the voice repeated, and hung up. Agent Chen immediately started barking orders into her radio. I need tactical units at Riverside Senior Center, but maintain distance. Suspects have visual on our location and are monitoring law enforcement communications. She turned to Detective Rodriguez. They're forcing us into an obvious ambush, but they're also showing us their hand. 5 hostages means they need a secure location with multiple exit routes. We can't just walk into that parking lot, Detective Rodriguez said grimly. But we also can't let them hurt those people. My phone buzzed with another text, Emma, tick-tock. We can see Agent Chin coordinating through the window. Every police unit she calls puts our hostages in more danger. They're watching us right now, I said, stepping away from the windows. How is that even possible? Agent Chin pulled out what looked like a small electronic device and began sweeping it around the room. After 30 seconds, it started beeping rapidly near Nana's new television. There, she said, pointing to a tiny device barely visible behind the power cord. Professional surveillance bug, probably placed during yesterday's break-in. Nana's voice was shaking with rage. They've been listening to everything. Every conversation about the investigation. Which explains how they stayed ahead of us, Detective Rodriguez realized. They heard us planning to contact the FBI, they knew when Agent Chen was arriving, they've been monitoring every move. Agent Chen carefully disabled the device, then gestured for us to follow her outside to her car. Once we were clear of potential surveillance, she opened her laptop and showed us a tactical map of Riverside Senior Center. The parking lot is completely exposed, no cover, multiple sight lines for snipers. But look at this. She pointed to the building's layout. The Senior Center has a basement level that connects to the old civil defense tunnels. Built in the 1960s, they run under 3 city blocks. You think that's where they're holding the hostages? I asked. It makes sense. Underground, soundproof, multiple escape routes. The question is how many people we're dealing with and what their exit strategy is. My phone rang again. This time it was Mrs. Henderson, whispering urgently. Emma, don't come to the Senior Center. I'm hiding in the supply closet, but I can see them setting up something in the parking lot. There are at least 6 people with equipment I don't recognize. Mrs. Henderson, get out of there now, I hissed into the phone. I can't, dear. They have someone watching the exits. But Emma, I overheard them talking. They're not planning to let the hostages go. They're planning to. The line went dead. Agent Chen's radio crackled with urgent updates. Command, we have reports of explosives being detected near the Senior Center's foundation. Explosives? Detective Rodriguez's face went white. They're going to destroy the evidence and eliminate the witnesses. We're out of time, Agent Chen said, already moving toward her car. I need you and your grandmother somewhere safe while we coordinate a tactical response. But as we reached the car, my phone buzzed with a video call. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mrs. Chen's terrified face filled the screen, with the other hostages visible behind her in what was clearly a basement room. Emma, she whispered, they say if FBI agents don't show up in the parking lot in 8 minutes, they're going to start with Mrs. Patterson. The camera panned to show Mrs. Patterson, Nana's gentle friend who'd always shared her crossword puzzles, tied to a chair with tears streaming down her face. 7 minutes now, the smooth voice said off camera. And Emma? We know you're listening, Agent Chen. Come alone, or they all die. Agent Chen looked at the video feed, her jaw set with grim determination. They're forcing our hand, but there's something they don't know. She turned to Detective Rodriguez. I need you to trust me on this. What are you thinking? He asked. Those civil defense tunnels, I studied the blueprints on the drive over. There's a maintenance access point 3 blocks away that connects to the Senior Center basement. If I can get tactical units in position there while creating the illusion of compliance with their demands. My phone buzzed again. Another text, Agent Chen, we can hear you planning through your radio communications. Any tactical units detected and the hostages die immediately. You have 5 minutes. They're monitoring police frequencies, Agent Chen realized, switching off her radio. Military-grade surveillance includes encrypted scanners. She looked at Detective Rodriguez. Give me your radio too. As he complied, my phone rang. This time it was Detective Rodriguez's number, but when he checked his phone, it wasn't ringing. They're spoofing phone numbers now, I said, answering. Hello. Emma, this is Mrs. Patterson. Her voice was weak and shaky. They're letting me call to tell you something important. The woman in charge, she's been watching your grandmother for over a year. This wasn't just about money. What do you mean? She has files, Emma. Medical records, military service records, family information going back decades. She knew about you, about your parents, about everyone your grandmother cares about. The line crackled, and I heard Patricia's voice in the background. That's enough, Margaret. Emma, Mrs. Patterson whispered urgently, she's been building cases on dozens of veterans. She said something about selling information to. The call ended abruptly. Agent Chen's face had gone pale. This isn't just fraud. If they're harvesting veterans' personal information systematically, we could be looking at espionage charges. For minutes, came another text. Nana grabbed my arm. Emma, I need to tell you something I should have mentioned earlier. Patricia asked me about you specifically several months ago. Questions about where you go to school, what you're studying, whether you had access to university research databases. Why didn't you tell me? I thought she was just being friendly, making conversation about my granddaughter. But now. She trailed off, looking stricken. Agent Chen's phone buzzed with what looked like an encrypted message. She read it quickly, her expression growing more serious. My field office just confirmed something disturbing. The government contractor connection you mentioned? Patricia's daughter works for a company that just lost a major defense contract amid allegations of security breaches. You think this is revenge? Detective Rodriguez asked. Or desperation? If they're facing federal charges for security violations, they might be trying to gather valuable information to sell to the highest bidder before they're arrested. My phone rang again, and this time it was a video call showing the basement room. But now there was a timer visible on the wall behind the hostages, counting down from 3 minutes. Emma, Patricia's voice came through clearly now, no longer disguised. I know Agent Chen thinks she's clever with her tunnel plan, but we've been monitoring thermal imaging satellites. We can see every tactical unit positioned within 6 blocks. Thermal satellites. This was beyond anything I'd imagined. Here's what's going to happen, Patricia continued. Agent Chen walks into that parking lot alone in 90 seconds, or I start demonstrating what I learned from my daughter about pressure-sensitive explosive devices. Agent Chen looked at me, then at Nana, then back at the countdown timer on my phone screen. There's something else, she said quietly. Something I haven't told you about why the Bureau sent me specifically. What? This isn't the first case like this we've seen. What do you mean this isn't the first case? I demanded, but Agent Chen was already moving. There's been a network operating across 12 states, targeting veterans for information harvesting. Patricia's daughter's company was the hub. They've been selling classified personal data to foreign contacts. She pulled out what looked like a small remote control. But we've been tracking them for 8 months. My phone showed 45 seconds on the timer. Emma, Patricia's voice crackled through. Agent Chen can explain her operation to you from the parking lot. Time's up for secrets. But Agent Chen smiled grimly and pressed the button on her device. Suddenly, my phone screen flickered, and instead of the basement room, I was looking at a tactical operations center with dozens of agents monitoring screens. What just happened? I gasped. We've been jamming their signals for the past 30 seconds, Agent Chen explained. Patricia thinks she's watching thermal satellites, but she's been looking at pre-recorded imagery we've been feeding her through her own surveillance equipment. Detective Rodriguez's radio crackled back to life, but with different voices. Team Alpha in position. Team Beta securing the basement level. We have visual on all 5 hostages. The countdown on my phone had stopped at 12 seconds. How long have you known? Nana asked quietly. Since yesterday morning. Your granddaughter's evidence was the final piece we needed to move on the entire network. Agent Chen looked at me with something like admiration. Your documentation was so thorough that it connected Patricia to fraud cases in 4 other states. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Mrs. Patterson, her real number this time. Emma. Oh, thank goodness. The FBI agents just got us out of there. Patricia and 2 other women are in custody, and they found boxes of stolen documents from over 300 veterans. Relief flooded through me so powerfully that my knees almost buckled. Nana wrapped her arms around me, both of us shaking. But what about the explosives? Detective Rodriguez asked Agent Chen. Theater. Intimidation tactic. They had some electronic devices that looked threatening on camera, but nothing actually dangerous. Patricia was hoping to buy enough time to destroy evidence and escape through those tunnels. Over the next hour, we watched from Agent Chen's car as a parade of law enforcement vehicles surrounded the senior center. Patricia, Sandra, and Rebecca were led away in handcuffs, along with 3 other people I didn't recognize. Mrs. Henderson appeared at our car window, grinning despite everything. Emma, dear, you should see the evidence room they set up in the community center. File cabinets full of documents, computers, even recordings of Patricia coaching others on how to identify profitable targets. Agent Chen nodded. The financial recovery will take time, but we've frozen their accounts and found almost $2 million across the network. Your grandmother should get back every penny they stole from her. Nana squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. But I'm prouder that you did this the right way. You didn't let anger make you do something reckless. As we finally drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. Emma, the senior center is planning a celebration dinner next week. Patricia may have stolen our money, but she couldn't steal our community. Thank you for giving us our dignity back. Looking at Nana in the passenger seat, sitting straighter than she had in months, I realized Patricia had been wrong about one thing. She thought she could identify easy targets, but she underestimated the strength of a veteran who raised a granddaughter to fight for what's right.